There is a saying known across the world: if any nation has suffered decades of instability and conflict, the British were almost certainly involved at some point. Iran's story of rise and fall begins with exactly that interference. By the end of the 19th century, Iran, then called Persia, appeared free on paper, but in reality, it was trapped between two enormous powers, Britain and Tsarist Russia. The British were interfering in Iran to protect their colony, British India, and to strengthen their grip on the Middle East. Meanwhile, Russia worked relentlessly to dominate Iran's northern territories. Slowly but surely, Iran's politics, its economy, and its foreign policy began bending under the weight of these two imperial powers. Iran was no longer master of its own fate. Then in 1908, everything changed forever. Massive oil reserves were discovered deep beneath Iranian soil. Oil, something that should have been Iran's greatest blessing, would instead become its most devastating curse. The real game for Iran's soul had begun. An English businessman, William Knox D'Arcy, had begun the search for oil in Iran. In 1901, he signed a 60-year oil exploration agreement with Qajar ruler Mozaffar ad-Din Shah. Under this deal, D'Arcy received rights to explore and extract oil from nearly the entire Iranian land. In return, Iran received only limited royalties, a mere 16% profit share. When D'Arcy ran out of money, Britain stepped in with full funding. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company was born, with the British government holding a direct stake. By 1914, Britain had purchased 51% of company shares, taking complete control entirely into its own hands. Iran's oil now powered the British Navy, British industries, and the British economy, while Iran received just 16% of its own wealth. Slowly, the Iranian people began realizing their country no longer owned itself. The Qajar dynasty had been ruling Iran since 1794, but by 1920, its grip had weakened considerably. Britain seized this moment perfectly. It interfered in Iranian politics, backed a military officer named Reza Shah Pahlavi, and engineered a coup, installing him as Iran's new ruler in 1925. Reza Shah cooperated with Britain for many years, but when World War II began in 1939, Germany's early battlefield successes caught his attention. He began to believe Germany might win this war, so he distanced himself from Britain and deepened trade and technical cooperation with Germany. Several German diplomats arrived and settled inside Iran. This infuriated both Britain and the Soviet Union immediately. In 1941, they jointly invaded Iran, arrested Reza Shah, and sent him into permanent exile. In his place, they installed his 21-year-old son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, as Iran's new Shah. The throne had been handed, not earned. While Britain and the Soviet Union occupied Iran, America was also present, supplying food, weapons, and essential supplies to its allies through Iranian territory. More than 300 Americans were deployed inside Iran during this period. America's eyes quietly fell on Iran's extraordinary strategic location and its vast natural oil resources. The opportunity was too valuable to ignore. When World War II finally ended, Iran lay economically shattered. Inflation was astronomical. Unemployment had risen dramatically, famine had made conditions even more unbearable than before. America stepped forward, wearing the mask of a generous friend. It provided food aid and massive financial assistance to struggling Iran. Then, crucially, America helped push Soviet troops out of Iranian territory through the United Nations. The Soviets had refused to withdraw from Iran's northern territories after the war, even supporting Kurdish and Azerbaijani separatists to fracture the country. America took this to the UN, accused the Soviets of violating the Tehran Conference and the UN Charter itself. In 1946, the Soviets were forced to withdraw. Iran was deeply grateful. Iran began believing America was different, not colonial like Britain, but genuinely caring and supportive. Iran did not know the deep strategy hidden beneath every American act of generosity. Britain was still consuming the majority of Iran's oil profits. Iran received only 20%, while British companies took everything else. Poverty and unemployment remained completely unchanged for ordinary Iranians. Then a member of the Iranian parliament, the Majlis, named Mohammad Mossadegh, began raising this injustice loudly through powerful speeches. He declared the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company agreement entirely illegal. His popularity exploded across the country. In 1951, the Majlis elected him as Iran's 35th prime minister. Unlike every prime minister before him, Mossadegh was no puppet. The moment he took office, he nationalized all of Iran's oil resources overnight, ending Britain's grip on Iranian oil in a single, bold stroke. Mossadegh became the greatest hero the Iranian people had ever known. But this single act simultaneously destroyed America's plans to dominate Iran and stripped Britain of its enormous oil wealth. Both nations responded with immediate oil embargoes and heavy economic sanctions. America cut off all aid to Iran entirely. Mossadegh refused to yield. So Britain and America activated MI6 and the CIA. In 1953, they engineered a military coup in Iran, had Mossadegh arrested, and placed him under lifelong house arrest. The nation that preaches democracy had just destroyed it. This wound in the Iranian soul would never fully heal. With Mossadegh gone, full power returned to Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, this time entirely on American terms. The Shah now danced completely to Washington's tune. America increased financial and military assistance to keep its new puppet firmly in place on the Iranian throne. In 1954, America, alongside British and other Western companies, signed a consortium agreement with the Shah. American companies gained rights to trade 40% of Iranian oil. British companies took another 40%. The remaining 20% went to Dutch and French companies. Iran got nothing meaningful. The Shah imported arms from America on such a staggering scale that Iran's defense budget rose by 800%. He adopted a fully pro-American foreign policy and openly supported Israel, deeply angering Arab and Middle Eastern nations across the region. In 1963, the Shah launched the White Revolution, granting women voting rights, opening schools and colleges for them, and giving them the right to hold public office. Iran's major cities began rapidly adopting Western dress, lifestyle, and social habits. But this was only one side of the story. The poor grew poorer. Unemployment worsened. America's growing influence and Western control over oil fueled deep rage in Iranian society. The Shah's forced westernization inflamed religious leaders beyond all tolerance. In this charged atmosphere, one religious leader began rising above all others. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini was electrifying crowds through his speeches, constantly accusing the Shah of selling Iran to America. He declared that the right to make laws belongs only to Allah. Iran must be governed by Islamic rule, and since religious scholars represent Allah, Iran's leadership must rest in their hands alone. As the highest Shia religious rank, Khomeini's words carried extraordinary weight and authority across Iranian society. His popularity grew faster than the Shah could control. In 1964, a frightened Shah exiled Khomeini first to Turkey, then to Iraq. But exile only made Khomeini more powerful and more aggressive. His supporters smuggled audio cassettes of his speeches secretly into Iran. Millions of Iranians gathered in hushed rooms to hear his words. The fire was burning far beyond anyone's ability to extinguish it now. By the 1970s, massive street protests had overtaken Iran. Thousands chanted, "Death to the Shah, death to America, independence, freedom, Islamic Republic," filling the streets with revolutionary fury. An exhausted Shah declared martial law. It changed nothing. In January 1979, the cancer-stricken Mohammad Reza Pahlavi fled Iran with his family to Egypt. On February 1, 1979, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini stepped off his plane onto Iranian soil after 15 years in exile. Millions of people filled every street to welcome him home. The roar of the crowd shook the earth. Within days, Khomeini abolished the monarchy completely and permanently. Iran was officially declared an Islamic Republic. Sharia law was introduced. The post of supreme leader was created, and Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini became Iran's first supreme leader. But hatred toward America deepened further when America gave refuge to the exiled Shah for cancer treatment. Iranians demanded his return to face justice. America refused. Khomeini kept telling his supporters, "America is our greatest enemy. Never stop chanting, 'Death to America.' Ever." On November 4, 1979, hundreds of Iranian students stormed the American embassy in Tehran and seized 66 American officials as hostages. Iranians widely believed this very embassy was where the CIA had orchestrated the 1953 coup against their beloved Prime Minister Mossadegh. For a large segment of Iranian society, this hostage crisis was pure revenge against America. Students were heroes. The very next day, Khomeini delivered a thunderous speech justifying the students' action entirely and called America the Great Satan for the first time. America's diplomatic relationship with Iran shattered completely and permanently that day. This was no longer a diplomatic crisis. This was the beginning of a mortal enmity that would define the next half-century of world history. America imposed sweeping sanctions and severed all diplomatic ties with Iran. Iran still refused to release the hostages. The crisis lasted 444 days, ending only in 1981 when Iran released the Americans on their terms entirely on its own conditions. For the world's greatest superpower, this was an open, burning humiliation. After forcing America to its knees, Khomeini's confidence was limitless. He began calling for divine governance across all Islamic nations, the abolition of every monarchy and dictatorship in the Muslim world. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Jordan grew deeply uneasy. But no one was more frightened than Iraq's Sunni dictator, Saddam Hussein. Iraq, like Iran, had a Shia Muslim majority, but Saddam was Sunni. He feared Khomeini would inspire Iraq's Shia groups to rebellion and strip him of his power. Sensing what he believed was Iran's moment of weakness, Saddam invaded Iran in September 1980. He was confident of quick victory. He was catastrophically wrong. The war raged for 8 devastating years. America helped Saddam with weapons, economic intelligence, and diplomatic support throughout. Kuwait, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia backed Iraq financially. Iraq used chemical weapons massively against Iran. America said nothing, not one word. Approximately 1 million people died on both sides. Iran had dreamed of leading the Muslim world, but Saudi Arabia had already won that contest. Backed by its Sunni majority, by Mecca and Medina, by its oil wealth, and by America's full, unconditional support. Iran seethed, but could not overcome this structural disadvantage, no matter how hard it tried. Iran knew it could never defeat America in direct conventional warfare. So, it chose the path of proxy war instead. It began arming, training, and funding Shia groups across the entire Middle East, systematically and deliberately. In Lebanon, Iran built Hezbollah into a formidable force, pressuring both Israel and American interests simultaneously. In Yemen, Iran supported the Houthi rebels to threaten Saudi Arabia from its own backyard. And despite Hamas being Sunni, Iran still gave Hamas in Palestine training, weapons, and significant financial support. Iran understood that to lead the Muslim world, it could not ignore Sunni groups. Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas became Iran's long-term strategic investments, tools to pressure America, Israel, and Saudi Arabia without ever fighting directly. In 1983, Hezbollah struck America twice inside Lebanon, first attacking the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, killing 17 Americans. Then months later, an explosive-laden truck destroyed the U.S. Marine barracks, killing 241 American soldiers. In 1984, America designated Iran a state sponsor of terrorism. The Shadow War had found its permanent name. In April 1988, an American naval ship struck an Iranian sea mine in the Persian Gulf. America retaliated with Operation Praying Mantis, destroying 2 Iranian oil platforms and sinking 6 Iranian warships. Half of Iran's naval fleet was rendered useless in hours. Then tragedy. On July 3, 1988, an American cruiser accidentally entered Iranian territorial waters. Iranian speedboats fired warning shots. In the chaos, the cruiser mistakenly identified Iran Air Flight 655, a civilian aircraft, as hostile and launched a missile. All 290 passengers were killed. Iran-America tensions reached their most extreme point yet. Despite everything, Khomeini never bowed to America. His defiance made him so beloved inside Iran that at his death in June 1989, over 10 million people joined his funeral procession, stretching across 32 kilometers of grief. His student, Ali Khamenei, became supreme leader, continuing the same anti-American proxy strategy without interruption or softening. In 1995, America imposed a total embargo on Iran. Then came September 11, 2001. Nearly 3,000 Americans were killed in coordinated terrorist attacks that shook America to its very foundation. In 2002, President George W. Bush labeled Iran, Iraq, and North Korea the axis of evil, accusing all three of endangering global security. 18 months later, America, which had once armed Saddam against Iran, now attacked Iraq itself over alleged weapons of mass destruction. Saddam was captured in 2003 and executed in 2006. No weapons of mass destruction were ever found. Iran and North Korea both drew the same cold conclusion: build nuclear weapons or face Iraq's fate. North Korea tested its first nuclear bomb in 2006 and its second in 2009, and America's aggression toward it softened immediately. Iran watched and learned. America and Israel were absolutely determined to prevent Iran from going nuclear. From 2003, America used aerial surveillance and drones to monitor Iran's nuclear program obsessively. This gave it detailed intelligence on enrichment sites, research facilities, and nuclear infrastructure across the country. Ironically, it was America itself that had helped build Iran's civilian nuclear program back in the 1960s, even supplying uranium to Iran directly. After the 1979 revolution, America withdrew all support, forcing Iran to pause its nuclear program due to lack of technology and trained scientists. From the 1990s through 2003, Iran quietly resumed nuclear weapons work using Pakistan's AQ-Khan network. When America and Israel discovered this, they launched a coordinated campaign to destroy Iran's nuclear ambitions through sanctions and assassination. In 2020, Israel's Mossad assassinated Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the father of Iran's nuclear program, using a remote-controlled machine gun in a stunning display of precision. Multiple other Iranian nuclear scientists were killed. Iranian infrastructure was repeatedly struck. Iran was being prevented from becoming nuclear by force and by shadow. By 2015, Iran's economy had been crushed by relentless sanctions. Under President Barack Obama, America, Britain, Russia, China, France, and Germany jointly signed the JCPOA, the nuclear deal with Iran. Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program and allow international inspectors full access. In return, major economic sanctions were lifted. For one brief moment, Iran and America stepped back from the edge of conflict. Then Donald Trump became president. Everything collapsed. In 2018, Trump accused Iran of secretly running nuclear activities and pulled America entirely out of the JCPOA deal. Sanctions crashed back down on Iran immediately and brutally. America designated the IRGC a terrorist organization. Iran designated U.S. military forces terrorists in return. Trump threatened to erase Iran from the map of the world. Then came January 3, 2020, the most dangerous moment yet. America assassinated General Qasem Soleimani, commander of the IRGC Quds Force and Iran's second most powerful man, in a drone strike at Baghdad airport. Iran erupted. 5 days later, Iran launched Operation Martyr Soleimani, firing 15 ballistic missiles at American military bases across Iraq, including the Al-Assad air base. No Americans were killed, but dozens suffered significant injuries. The world held its breath, waiting for what came next. In the same tense atmosphere, overwhelmed with rage, Iran made a catastrophic mistake. On January 8, 2020, Iranian forces mistakenly shot down Ukrainian International Airlines Flight 752 departing Tehran, killing all 176 people on board. Iran initially lied about a mechanical failure. International pressure and hard evidence forced a confession. Tension subsided briefly after 2020. But when the Israel-Hamas war erupted in October 2023, Iran-America relations exploded again. Iran directed its proxies to strike multiple U.S. military bases across the Middle East repeatedly. America responded by firing approximately 125 missiles at Iranian-backed militia groups in Iraq and Syria, destroying numerous camps completely. President Biden called it merely a trailer of what was coming. Then on June 13, 2025, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, targeting Iran's nuclear sites and military infrastructure simultaneously with massive airstrikes on Tehran, Isfahan, and multiple other Iranian cities at once. IRGC Commander Hossein Salami, Iranian Army Chief Mohammad Bagheri, and several senior nuclear scientists were killed. Iran fired over 100 ballistic missiles and drones at Israel in response. America then entered directly. On June 21, 2025, the United States struck Iran's 3 major nuclear enrichment facilities, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, dropping dozens of massive bunker-buster bombs, each weighing approximately 14,000 kilograms. All 3 nuclear facilities were completely and utterly destroyed. The Iran-America conflict had not become a full direct war, but it had reached a level of complexity and danger that the world had never seen between these two nations. The biggest question after decades of conflict remains: why has this never been resolved? The answer lies not just in foreign policy, but in history, trauma, and the politics of pride. For Iran, the 1953 coup, decades of brutal sanctions, and the constant threat of regime change have become a permanent national memory. For America, the hostage crisis, Hezbollah, the Houthis, death to America, and Iran's relentless growing influence across the Middle East have become permanent existential security concerns. Both sides look at each other only through the lens of their own deepest wounds. America's allies, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and other Middle Eastern partners, ensure that every clash between Iran and any of them automatically pulls America in. Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and Palestine have all become theaters of this shadow war through Iran's extensive proxy network. America will never leave the Middle East. Its oil, its trade routes, and its strategic importance are simply too enormous. And so Iran and America will keep colliding again and again. Iran still desperately wants nuclear weapons. America and Israel are still determined to prevent it at any cost. Inside Iran today, years of accumulated rage, crushing inflation, a collapsing currency, and skyrocketing food prices have driven millions onto the streets against their own government and supreme leader himself. This movement, beginning in December 2025, has now swept across most of Iran. Millions chant, "Khamenei must go," openly and fearlessly in public streets. Women by the thousands are publicly burning their hijabs and burqas, openly defying the mandatory hijab law that has suppressed Iranian women for decades. Photographs of Khamenei are being burned with cigarettes. Government buildings are on fire. Islamic Republic flags are being pulled from their poles and destroyed. Supreme Leader Khamenei has unleashed his military on protesters with no restraint. Over 5,000 people have already lost their lives in the crackdown. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has openly backed the protesters, promising every possible form of American support for their cause. He warned every nation trading with Iran that extra tariffs and secondary sanctions would follow. He suggested military action against Iran remained firmly on the table. Iran's officials struck back immediately, blaming America directly for the unrest inside Iran, and warning that any American military action would come at a devastating price for U.S. forces and interests across the entire Middle East. And so America and Iran stand once again at the sharpest edge of history's knife. On one side stands the world's greatest military power. On the other stands the Middle East's most determined, most enduring, and most unbending player. Will this enmity ever truly end? Or will the mutual hatred of these two great powers finally drag the entire world into the flames of another catastrophic war? Only history will answer that question. And history, as Iran and America both know better than anyone, has a very long and unforgiving memory.